Julian. Julian, what are you doing? Stop drinking that beer! Julian, this is a child's video game! Put down that beer! Julian. Julian! Julian! Shining Force 3, often hailed as the greatest of the Shining Force games, a game so massive it was spread over 3 scenarios. The story was such a monstrous beast that it was divided over 3 separate games. This was before Xenosaga, this was before Final Fantasy XIII, this was before Mass Effect, this was back during the Saturn days where something like this was completely unheard of. But the Saturn was a complete mess. Sega rushed the system to market in an attempt to get a head start against the looming presence of Sony's PlayStation. Sony destroyed them. In the smoke of the incredibly one-sided battle, Sega only ended up localizing the first scenario of Shining Force 3 for the West. Scenarios 2 and 3 were never localized. This left the story incomplete for Sega's English fans. This was 3 decades ago. Here in 2023, I sat down to play all 3 scenarios and the premium disc. I played them all back to back to back to back. I never got to play Shining Force 3 as a kid because, sorry, despite being a lifelong Sega fan, I decided that getting a PlayStation for Final Fantasy VII was more important. I was also like 15 years old, so I was very much stuck in the I can only get one video game system mindset. 6 or 7 years later, I was able to go back and play Shining Force 3 Scenario 1. I was a young adult, we were well into the PS2 golden age of gaming, and I was a very angry human being. I did not like Shining Force 3. It was not enough like Shining Force 1 or Shining Force 2. I didn't like the graphics. The battle graphics I found especially egregious. I found early polygonal games could really walk the line between looking horrible and looking great. Final Fantasy VII's battle graphics sold me on the system, but the blocky characters that walked around on the map were horrendous. Shining Force 3 had terrible looking polygonal battle graphics and these ugly, shambling turds straight out of Donkey Kong Country. Like I said, I was a very angry human being. Now I'm 40 years old, the PS5 is out there, and the world is a very different place. I'm a very different person. My ability to critique things I do and do not like are much stronger. There are also very good fan translations of Scenarios 2, 3, and the premium disc. It was finally time to sit down and play through all of this. It was time to get into bed with Shining Force 3 and gorge on every scrap of content I could get my hands onto. This is my redemption arc. Shining Force 3 is hella sweet. In 1991, Sega had Sega Consumer Development 4 create a new RPG for their mega hit, the Mega Drive. Sega CD4 had help from Climax Entertainment with putting together this new dungeon crawler. With colorful characters, a cartoony style, and plenty of monsters to be vanquished, Shining and the Darkness was born. This title would be renamed to Shining in the Darkness for the Western market, and it would become the first entry into the long and storied Shining franchise. As the 90s continued marching onwards towards the new millennium, Sega CD4, later Sonic Software Planning, later still Camelot Software Planning, would continue to predominantly create Shining titles. Shining Force and Shining Force 2 were popular tactics RPGs on the Mega Drive/Genesis, and were the games that initially shone that spotlight of fame on Camelot. You could always count on Camelot to drop some absolute fire for Sega during these tubular and radical times. Not only did they release some stellar Genesis games, but they also dropped 3 incredible Shining Force games on the Game Gear, a great Shining Force title on the Sega CD, and some Shining spin-offs during the early days of the Saturn. The Game Gear Shining Force games were classic Shining Force titles, but portable. The Sega CD's Shining Force CD was a remastered compilation of the first two Game Gear Shining Force titles with some all-new bonus chapters, and the Saturn got an action title in Shining Wisdom and a return to first-person dungeon crawling with Shining the Holy Ark. I still grimace at that game's title. Needless to say, the Shining series was in a great position. Camelot had flirted with some non-Shining titles in the late 90s, releasing two titles for Sony's brand new PlayStation. The notoriously awful Beyond the Beyond in 1995, and the critically acclaimed Everybody's Golf in 1997. 1997 was also when Camelot brought us Shining Force 3. Shining Force 3 was announced for the Sega Saturn in August 1993 and released in Japan in December of the same year. Remember when games had lightning-fast turnaround time? I do. The game later landed in Europe in June 1998 and in North America in July 1998. Fans were excited to get more tactics RPG action, but the Saturn was already dead. See, Sega's competition with the PS1 was already over. The PS1 killed it practically immediately, and while some Sega stalwarts were still holding on for dear life, some of us fled the sinking ship like rats. Like I said, I dropped Sega, and instead of getting a Saturn, I got a PlayStation. I was a kid with no income, so the one-game console bias was in full effect. I wanted Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VI was one of my favorite games ever, and Final Fantasy VII looked great. Meanwhile, Shining Force is my absolute favorite series ever, but I thought that Shining Force 3 looked really bad, so I dropped Sega. And shortly thereafter, Sega dropped Sega 2. The Saturn was dead, it was time to move on to the Dreamcast. And shortly after that, even the Dreamcast was dropped. Sega became a third-party developer and would make games for everyone. As a result of dropping the Saturn so fast, the West never got Scenarios 2 and 3 of Shining Force 3. We were left on a cliffhanger. Sega never even re-released Shining Force 3 in any capacity. The re-release of the Genesis games happens practically every other year, but there has been no official re-release of Shining Force 3. And by Shining Force 3, I mean Shining Force 3 Scenario 1, let alone any sort of past tense localizations and re-releases of Scenarios 2 and 3. Shining Force 3 is dead. Unless you are an absolute diehard, but more on that later. Shining Force 3's second scenario was released in Japan in April 1998, and the third scenario was released in Japan in September 1998. These three games were all released about 4 months apart from each other, and I want to be clear, this is an incredible Herculean task. Yes, the three games all have a lot of shared assets, but there is enough difference between the three scenarios that it is very clear that these are three separate games. The games aren't just reskins of each other. There is a huge shared plot, characters that weave in and out of the story, and some maps are revisited, but without the maps being redone. A good example is the train map from Scenario 1, where Symbiote and crew have to rescue refugees all while dodging moving trains, whereas in Medion's quest in Scenario 2, the map is much more straightforward, with a powerful boss waiting for you at the end. The refugees and the trains are nowhere in sight. These three scenarios are very much three separate games. The story of Shining Force 3 is not just the biggest of any Shining game, but the biggest of any Camelot game. When I say Shining Force 3 is Mass Effect before Mass Effect, I truly mean it. There are choices that you make in Scenario 1 that will affect Scenario 2, and there are choices that you make in Scenario 2 that affect Scenario 3. I wanted to do everything in all three of these games because I knew this was going to be an investment in time, so I was and am unsure if I'm ever going to do a full replay of these games in the future. So, when I missed Pen and was going to completely replay all of Scenario 1 so I could recruit a super secret useless character in Scenario 3, I was ready to do it all over again. I then found out that there are several characters I wouldn't get because I had made decisions earlier that locked them all out. I then decided, No, you will not replay all 3 of these games to recruit Edmund. Plus, there is some bizarre, ironic parable here for me because it took me a good 10 playthroughs of the original Shining Force back in the day before I figured out how to recruit Jogurt the Yogurt. The fact that I miss Pen almost mirrors this in a bizarre, ironic sort of way. Pour one out for Pen, the useless little freak. Scenario 1 and 2 run concurrently with each other, and Scenario 3 takes place towards the end of Scenario 1 and 2, leading to the story's culmination far after the end of Scenarios 1 and 2. Your protagonist of Scenario 1 is the Republican Lord Synbios. Your protagonist of Scenario 2 is the Imperial Prince Medion, and your protagonist of Scenario 3 is the mercenary Julian. Julian features briefly in both Scenario 1 and 2 as a member of Synbios' and Medion's forces respectively. This is a good way to glue all 3 scenarios together. And you'll also have some other characters who weave in and out of the narrative, kind of keeping things coherent. Scenario 1 starts with the leaders of the Empire and the Republic meeting for a peace conference in the neutral city of Saraband. The Empire's Emperor Domeric and the Republic's King Benetram and their aides are meeting to potentially bolster peace between the 2 nations. But I mean, it'd be a pretty short story if things went to plan that quickly. You take control of human swordsman Synbios, the son of Republican Lord Conrad. Synbios has a nerdy little group of friends including the Centaur Knight Danteres, Chiantol Healer Grace, and Elf Mage Mascarin, aka my wife. Synbios and friends investigate the city during the peace conference. Meanwhile, Scenario 2 starts in a similar vein, but this time you control Prince Medion of the Empire. Medion also has a nerdy little force with him, including Campbell the Centaur Knight, Udo the Halfling Healer, and Synthethus the Elf Mage. They also investigate Saraband during the peace conference. Medion is the 3rd prince of the Empire and also the son of the Emperor's mistress. This earns him scorn from his older, pure-blood brothers, Arant and Megaron. Some members of both the military and the Emperor's aides also tend to treat him worse than his brothers. During the peace talks, a group of masked monks are introduced. These are the pagan priests of Bulzome. Both Synbios and Medion's forces independently cross blades with the monks within the city limits. After the battle, the Synbios force is shocked to witness King Benetram and a group of masked Bulzome monks leading away Emperor Domeric in chains. After returning to the Republican base, Synbios and friends are once again shocked as this whole time Benetram has been there. The king and force set out to find who this imposter Benetram is and why they have kidnapped the Emperor. Meanwhile, Medion and crew engage in a dialogue with so many Imperial characters. Like, this has already gotten to Final Fantasy Tactics levels of discourse. After a whole lot of talking, they come to the conclusion that the Republicans feigned peace talks in order to kidnap the Emperor. They vow to take out the Republicans and take back the Emperor. Medion and his force head out after the Republican renegades. Needless to say, the opening events of Scenario 1 set up the Imperials to be the villains, and the opening events of Scenario 2 set up the Republicans to be the villains. Synbios and his party eventually make their way to Balsamo Village, where the local inn is rife with masked monks. The force finds the captured Domeric, who is in possession of 4 Bulzome high priests: the nefarious Fial, the cruel Basanda, the manipulative Desharin, and the brutal Goriate. Fial admits to being the imposter Benetram and laughs off the threats of this tiny force of, well, like 5 level 3 soldiers that were sent after them. Seriously, Republic, what are you doing? The high priests and the masked monks bully the force out of the inn and promptly leave, unfazed by the weakling brigade sent after them. Meanwhile, in Scenario 2, Medion and friends arrive in Balsamo well after these events. The citizens of the town are terrified of the brutal empire, so without much probing, the Medion force discovers that the Synbios force has headed to the town of Railhead to chase after General Proton, as he and his army are meant to escort King Benetram back to the safety of Espinia in Republic lands. The differences between the Synbios force and the Medion force at this stage is night and day. The Republican rebels are loved by the free people, while the barbaric empire are hated. You feel for Medion though, as he is much kinder than his older brothers and his father the Emperor. While the Imperial forces are incredibly terrifying, Medion and his friends show that there are decent and kind people within the Empire. While trying to get access to the trains and railhead so they can speed up their travel to Espinia, Synbios and crew meet up with the mercenary Julian. Julian is a character first met in Shining the Holy Ark, ostensibly a prequel to Shining Force 3. I'll do a separate video on this someday. Julian is also the main character in Scenario 3. Julian is a good unit, and having him join the Synbios army for a while is a good way to hype up the final scenario. Eventually, the Synbios force make it to Railhead and get a train, but instead of finding a friend in General Proton, they encounter the Imperial Prince Arant and his army. At the same point, Medion shows up to apprehend the Synbios force, but instead of fighting each other, the two forces end up teaming up to save a group of Free City refugees that both Republican and Imperial forces have decided are enemies of their respective empires. Whoopsie doodle, it's a classic case of the good guys and the bad guys are on both sides. Here the two forces discuss their plans and split on mostly amicable terms, regretting that the next time they meet they will probably have to fight each other. The Synbios force decide to head to Quonus to try to find a way into Espinia, as it's clear they won't be meeting Proton. Here they fight a Vandal named Abdark. Vandals are basically this game's version of Greater Devils. They're bad news. Turns out the Bolzome monks have struck a deal with Garvin of the Empire. Bolzome wants to, well, resurrect Bolzome, and Garvin wants the Empire to crush the Republic. The Republic's over here just saying, yo, can we just live in peace? The Synbios force pursues the army of Imperial soldier Spiriel, but encounter the Vandal Gulm along the way. Gulm is the Vandal that killed Julian's father in Shining the Holy Ark, so naturally your boy engages him in battle for revenge. Now at this stage, Julian is like level 7 and Gulm is level massive mega. So Gulm knocks him out, throws him in a river, and pieces out. Shortly after this happens, Medion's force in Scenario 2 pick up poor waterlogged Julian, and he joins their team for a while, before leaving them to head to Imperial capital of Dystonia. Before leaving, the Medion force rescue the young innovator child Gracia from the Imperial Rainbloods. Gracia is basically descended from a race who were the yin to the Vandals' yang, and the Rainbloods are an exceedingly powerful cabal of soldiers working for the Imperials. Gracia joins Julian on his excursion to the Imperial capital. As the events of Scenario 1 and 2 continue in tandem, with political backstabbings, Vandal plottings, and a whole lot of fighting, we see both Synbios and Medion's force meet up in the Republic city of Aspia. The Synbios force defeats the massive ancient titan that the Empire mobilized to destroy the gates of the city so that they could annex it. Both forces prepare to face off against each other, but Julian and his force arrive. Cue Scenario 3. Julian's story picks up about maybe 75% into the events of Scenario 1 and 2. Julian and his crew are heading to the Imperial capital of Dystonia to warn them that an ancient weapon, read, giant flying mushroom called the Walkyrie is heading there to destroy them. Gracia tags along as his staff of Besim can destroy the Walkyrie. As Scenario 3 continues, the pieces start falling into place. The Bullzome High Priests, Emperor Domeric, and the Ninja Yasha have combined forces to get what they want. Julian wants to defeat Galm. The Republicans still just want to not get killed by everybody. Yasha is 3 ninjas in 1. You fight the Rainbloods 2 at a time. The old man wizard from the save menu in all 3 of these games is a wiseman who lives in a flying city. You fight Galm, but you don't beat him, but you still win regardless. He then tells you how to beat Bullzome for some reason. Will Galm take his place in Shining Force 4? I mean, it's been over 25 years, so I'm sure that's not going to happen next. Hey, all 3 forces have joined together for one huge battle at the end. Yes, that's right, 3 battles all at the same time with 3 different Shining Forces. Then you fight Bullzome, but don't egress to raise your dead characters or heal, because if you do, you have to fight all 3 battles at the same time again, and that takes about 3 hours of your life. Then everyone's happy because all of the Vandals are dead, except for Galm, but I guess everybody forgot about him, so who cares? Also, something about Arthur from Shining the Holy Ark. The Empire is decimated and the Republic can finally say, see ya. And that is my unhinged breakdown of the huge story of Shining Force 3, all 3 scenarios. Like, I left out so much shit like 12 Imperial Generals, all of the ninja characters that Birdmen used to send love letters back and forth between Synbios and Medion, the 3 or 4 girls who want to get with Julian, the revelation that Gracia isn't an innovator, and then literally in the same scene becoming one anyway, Medion's mom, Medion's sister, Synbios' dad. I'm not a story breakdown specialist. My things are nostalgic philosophy, mechanical breakdowns, and being sad that it's not 1994. But, needless to say, Shining Force 3 has a huge story, and to think that this story was told in 3 different games, all released over like 14 months in the late 90s, is incredible. Mass Effect, eat your heart out. Also, throw Ashley into the sun. Shining Force 3 has a lot of characters. Being a strategy RPG, some of them are not very well fleshed out at all, but some of them are. Some of them are ridiculously more fleshed out than others. This game also has real compelling villains. Yes, it's still in the "ooh, we're so evil" sorts of villains territory that the previous Shining games had, but there's a lot more nuance this time around, with some villains wanting to crush opposing nations because of racism, some villains wanting to protect those that they love, and some villains simply wanting revenge. But between all 3 scenarios you have like 60 playable characters, so naturally some of these characters are going to be less well-rounded than some of the others. I don't think that the massive political story Shining Force 3 tells could be told without compelling characters. You essentially have 3 main factions, the Republicans of Aspia, the Imperials of Dystonia, and the Monks of Bullzome. You have some smaller factions that help turn the wheels of the story as well, the Monks of Elbasem, the Rainbloods, the Ninjas, the Church, and loads more. This story is dense, but it's approachable. While the story of Shining Force 3 never quite reaches the levels of Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre, I am actually totally fine with that. It's a great, deep, and complex story, but you don't need dual political and literary degrees to fully understand it. Here's a short list of some of my favorite/interesting characters. Synbios, Medion, and Julian are your default Shining Force leaders. They use swords, they have okay movement, decent attack, alright defense, eventually learn Bolt, and if they die, you retreat from battle and lose half your gold. The differences between them is that Synbios starts off equipped with a sword, Medion with a rapier, and Julian with a blade. Medion and Julian both also learn Inferno at high levels, making them just a little bit more useful than Synbios. Oops. The 3 of them all have your standard hero tropes. Synbios has daddy issues, Medion has mommy issues, and Julian is on a revenge quest to kill the nefarious vandal Lord Galm. Julian also has a bit more backstory, as he was an NPC in Shining the Holy Ark. Despite being a child, he was already hellbent on defeating the vandal to avenge his father. I'm into it. Mascarin joins in Scenario 1 as your default mage and is the best mage since Teo in Shining Force 1. She gains an incredible amount of MP, which pairs nicely with her Blaze level 4, costing practically nothing to cast. She basically just rolls around nuking enemies all day long. She also eventually gets Bolt to level 4 as well, so she continues to rate highly even in the late game. While I didn't use him, the Goblin Ratchet is a great design and concept. He's basically a tiny goblin man who rides in a huge steam-powered mech suit. The design harkens back to the Steam Knight Gunts from the original Shining Force game. I'm not a huge fan of steampunk, but Shining Force has always done it well. Steampunk in Shining Force is basically relegated to 1 or 2 units or enemies per title, just the right amount. Frank the Wolfman. Okay, so Shining Force games have a penchant for Wolfman melee characters who fight with claws and just kick ass. Frank is this game's version of that trope, but what I love about him is his name, Frank. And the Wolfman from Shining Force 1 is named Xylo, but his Japanese name was Zappa. Is that a Frank Zappa reference? I think it is. Hell yeah, boy, cue Joe's Garage. Shining Force 1's Arthur is back in Scenario 2, but don't ask me why, because he still sucks. Gracia is a great combo of mage/healer who actually has some okay stats. He's also heavily plot relevant, especially in Scenario 3. He's of Innovator blood, which are basically anti-vandals. He can wield the Staff of Besem, which can destroy vandal magic, and he can also use his Innovator magic to promote your units a second time. Very cool. Dawnheart is a Centaur Knight who joins Medion as an NPC in Scenario 2, but joins Julian in Scenario 3 and is a bit of glue to hold the scenarios a bit more tightly together. Also, remind me in the future never to mention centaurs and glue in the same sentence ever again. Not a fan of blue in Shining Force 1? That's okay. Scenario 3 has Thousand, a white dragon murder machine who is relevant from the second he joins you. Leon, a lion man who wields axes. Say no more. Harold, I'm totally gay for him. The mysterious Jane jumps in and out of the story at several points, sometimes helping, sometimes hindering the Shining Forces. We eventually learn that she's a cross between Innovator and Vandal, so she's a talented mage and a cleric all rolled into one. If you do a few pedantic tasks during the final battle of Scenario 3, she'll actually join you for the premium disc battles, which is a really good thing because you're going to need as many people with Aura level 4 as you can possibly get. Yasha is a recurring villain. They are a mysterious and powerful ninja whom seems to be working for Emperor Domeric. As the plot moves forward, you start to realize that Yasha can get around. They seem to be able to continent hop at will. We eventually find out that Yasha is in fact 3 separate individuals that all work in lockstep with himself. The Rainbloods are a terrifying group of blood-red garbed warriors teased in Scenario 2. These incredibly powerful units spend an entire battle killing high-powered units with ease just on their way to get to you. If you don't get to your goal fast enough, these characters will mow through you, killing any unit they engage with a single attack. This sets them up as powerful foes, so when you get to actually properly fight them in Scenario 3, you go into these battles knowing that you have a hell of a challenge ahead of you. The 4 Bullzome High Priests are also compelling because they show up quite a few times to either gaslight you or straight up beat the brains out of your skull. Like the Rainbloods, this slow march to finally fighting them is a great way to build them up as a proper threat, especially when you need to fight all 4 of them at the same time, yikes. Shining Force 3 has a lot of characters, like 100 plus named characters with portraits, and having a portrait immediately means that you're important in the Shining world, and thusly they can't all have huge personalities or huge parts in the story. And that's fine, not every character in a game has to be the equivalent of a Game of Thrones character. Also, Winds of Winter is never coming out. The gameplay in Shining Force 3 is a lot like the earlier Shining Force games. It took me a long time to come to terms with this, because there are some things that are a little different and some things that are a lot different. But it's still very much like the previous games. It's a turn-based strategy role-playing game. It has an overhead third-person view. Battles are on a square grid and units take turn in order of whoever has the highest agility stat. When engaging enemies on the battle map, the scene shifts to a side-on battle screen for a better view of the action. You can visit towns outside of battle to talk to NPCs, buy equipment, and generally relax a bit. You can save your game, you can promote your units, you can laugh at the joke. You know, it's a Shining Force game. Like I said earlier, back in the day when I finally played SF3 in like 2007 or whatever, all I could see was the differences. All I could see were the new things or the changed things. The DNA that made up the games that I loved was corrupted and the spirit was destroyed, or something similarly idiotic. It's only after dropping 200 plus hours on this game did I come to appreciate how similar combat, systems, writing, and everything else actually are. Combat in Shining Force 3 takes place on a square grid not unlike the prior games in the series or a lot of other SRPGs. The difference now is that you can swing around the camera to get better and different angles of the battlefield. This camera system is pretty helpful as you can lose place of your troops when you get like 30 plus units all fighting each other. If you played the earlier Shining Force games, you'll immediately notice that SF3's controls during combat are a little bit slippery. In those earlier games, your characters would snap to the next square when you're moving, you know, tile-based RPGs. But in Shining Force 3, your characters don't swap to the squares they are in, so you kinda slip and slide all around the map while moving. It's a little bit, I'll be honest, it's a little bit annoying, but after 200 hours, you kinda get used to it, so whatever. Now, like I said, only Scenario 1 was localized for the West. If you are going to play the legit localization, I'd also recommend accessing the menu and turning off the battle voices. During battle, some of your characters will make quips, and good grief, it is some of the worst voice acting I have ever heard. Just turn it off. Okay, maybe keep it on for a minute or two just to have a quick laugh, then turn it off. I can't comment on the Japanese voices as your selected options will all carry over in between games as well, so when I turned them off in Scenario 1, they ended up staying off for all of the games. One big new addition is that during combat, your characters can gain friendships. That's right, just like in Fire Emblem. Well, not quite just like in Fire Emblem, but kinda like Fire Emblem, I guess. This is a first for the series, and it adds a bit more strategy to battles. If characters interact with each other, cast spells, use items on each other, they will get a boost. You also get a boost by attacking enemies when in close proximity with other characters. There's 5 levels of friendship: ally, partner, friend, trusted, and soulmate. The higher you go, the better the bonus. Each character provides a different bonus. Symbios gives a bonus to attack, Mascarin gives a bonus to magic, Dantares gives a bonus to not receiving critical hits from enemies, etc. You can also lose friendship levels. If a character dies in battle, they lose a friendship level with everyone in that battle. This gives you a reason to try to keep your characters alive. I really like this because in past Shining Force games, there's no real penalty if someone dies other than a nominal gold fee for resurrection. Making combat even more spicy this time around are special attacks. As you level up, some of your characters will learn special moves. The more you use one type of weapon, the higher your proficiency gets, and if that proficiency gets high enough, you will learn special attacks. Unlike magic spells that you select and cast with each spell depleting your MP pool, special attacks randomly trigger like critical hits and counterattacks. You can't choose when to use them, but they also don't cost anything to use. This adds a nice new level of strategy because you never know when one of these special attacks is going to trigger. And some of them can also cause status effects, so things can get super spicy super fast. Check out the character status screen and you'll see a lot of things that the previous Shining games didn't have. Yes, you'll have your stats, your level, what you have equipped, your spells if you know any, but now you have a weapon level, magic resistance, friendship levels. SF3 is a total glow up from the previous games. But even if you didn't play the previous games, you can still enjoy Shining Force 3. There are only some tangential story connections between the previous games and this one. These lands are brand new just for these 3 scenarios, so you can treat this as a jumping in point for the series. He says knowing that it's nearly 100% impossible that anyone in 2023 is starting their Shining Force journey with Shining Force 3. Like I said, it was never re-released, and only the first scenario was localized. Accidentally ending up with a Sega Saturn and a very underprinted, very second market expensive RPG is about as likely as getting hit by a falling meteor. Even grabbing an ISO and Saturn EMU is not going to be incredibly likely, as Saturn emulation was pretty bad up until pretty recently. Plus, Shining Force and Shining Force 2 are on just about everything these days, so coming across those is going to be a hell of a lot easier than Shining Force 3 in any form. Shining Force 3 has maps within maps, Mapception. They're actually called ruins. These ruins are only available on one map per chapter, and you can only enter them if you've found their map previously in the chapter. If you don't find the map, the ruins just sit there taunting you, jerks. Inside the ruins, you will find all manners of treasure, but most of the treasure is hidden in chests that you can't open. You need to wait for enemy thieves to crack the chests open and then attack them, causing them to drop the treasure. Some ruins will have traps, some will have puzzles, some will have added monsters. This makes them a little bit more entertaining or a bit more of a hassle. In fact, that's how all of the battles in Shining Force 3 measure out. Uh-oh, it's that part of the video where I say the bad things about the electronic video game for children. So battles in the Shining Force games have always had a particular flow to them. Get in, move to the enemies, kill them, rinse, repeat. Some battles will have an interesting twist to them. Battles like the Laser Eye in Shining Force, a giant laser weapon that will attack every half dozen turns or so, but the caveat is that the laser will hit everyone in a very huge area, friend or foe alike. Another classic battle with a twist is the battle against Odd Eye in Shining Force 2, where the floor will constantly fall out from beneath you. You'll never drop down to your death, and you'll never get stuck, but this tactic really stalls you against enemies that fly and enemies with distance attacks. The Shining Force games have had a plethora of great battles like this, but almost every single battle in Shining Force 3 will have a twist. In fact, I wouldn't even call them twists, they're more akin to gimmicks. Some of them are fun. There is a battle in Scenario 3 against 2 of the Rainbloods where there is this huge optional cave system that you can spelunk through that is full of treasures, beasts, exits that can give you an advantage in battle, and even a new recruitable character. But then you have battles like the train battle in Scenario 1 where you need to rescue 5 refugee NPCs from being attacked. Never mind that they die ridiculously easily and your path gets cut off by moving trains. Or how about the Elbasem Temple cores? They are kind of like the Laser Eye, but they hit a larger and more random area, and every turn, whether they attack or not, you need to sit through a battle animation of them warming up. Even with fast forward, this sucked. Now, mitigating the fact that some battles had some absolutely infuriating mechanics, Enemy AI is actually pretty good. It's definitely a lot more robust from the previous games, that's for sure. Items and equipment have had a huge overhaul as well. Now, instead of a minuscule 4 item slots per character, which holds your equipped items and your usable items, you now have 4 slots dedicated to usable items and 4 slots dedicated to equipment. 8 doesn't seem like a lot, but compared to 4, it's a freaking godsend. Some equipment will give you access to magic spells when you equip them, and depending on your weapon level, these spells will even gain levels. A lot of RPGs have diminishing returns for spell user equipment later in the game, as you will never really attack with your magic users, so to mitigate this, these added spells were implemented and can make your magic users a lot more versatile. Teaching a mage a healing spell or a healer an attack spell is so good. As you adventure through the games, you'll gather mithril, dark matter, and orichalcum. These items can be used by blacksmiths to create super powerful weapons for you, at a super powerful price. There are 2 levels of blacksmith, with the earlier blacksmiths unable to make the absolute best weapons in the game. It's usually best to wait till the end game to roll for better gear. Dark matter gear is always cursed, so I personally skip it. Cursed gear can sometimes damage you after you attack, which is fine, but sometimes cursed gear will cause you to not actually attack when you attack an enemy, and that is real bad. Orichalcum is for late Scenario 3 gear and is just about the best you can get in any situation. Speaking of the late game, each scenario has a huge bonus dungeon called the Hero's Test, which appears at the end of the scenario before the final boss. These huge and optional dungeons include multiple floors and loads of enemies. These are a great way to grind some levels because let me tell you, you will need to level up your dudes. Not just your main force, but also your reserve units. At the end of Scenario 1, while your main force heads off to fight the Titan, your reserve force has to climb up a mountain to flick a switch. This mountain is loaded with dudes including magic users and flying attackers. If your reserve force is underleveled, you will not make it. And if you haven't gathered a lot of secondary optional characters, you can find yourself going into battle with characters that are not just underleveled, but also not many of them. Imagine getting to the last battle only to discover that your secondary force consists of one single unpromoted unit. As someone who loves to grind characters into absolute murder machines, cool. I am down with this. As a casual game player, I can imagine that this caused a lot of people to straight up stop playing. Thus the reason for the Hero's Test dungeons. Just use all of your units. Level them all up, promote them, get them gear. Just get ready to need to use anyone and everyone to smash some heads. Also, get ready for double promotions. Scenario 1 and 2 has promotions for your units at around level 10, but characters in Scenario 3 are much beefier as the story begins around the same time Scenarios 1 and 2 at or about 75%. So your characters in Scenario 3 get promoted at level 20. Basically, your dudes in Scenario 3 are already promoted when the Synbios and Medeon forces join you at the end of Scenario 3, and then everybody is ready to be promoted a second time at level 20. And promotions in this game are very, very good. In the previous games, your stats can suffer from promoting too early, but in Shining Force 3, just promote them as soon as you can. You will actually gain some serious stat buffs on promotion and some out-of-this-world stat buffs after your second promotion. Your characters will be absolute war machines at the end of Scenario 3. Just about everyone, even the joke characters, are viable with enough training. Even the animal characters are usually viable too, since they almost all have real weapons that they can equip. One thing I miss from Shining Force 2 is item-based promotions. Something that Shining Force 2 introduced to rapturous applause but then was never heard from again. It's item-based promotions. Now, these promotions are similar to your standard promotions. Hit level 20, talk to a priest, you become a new class, you get new powers, you get the ability to equip stronger or different weapons, the standard promotion stuff. Where they differ is that you need to find a special item to achieve them. If the right character is holding the right item while promoting, they will become a different and more specialized class. For example, a Vigor Ball allows a priest to promote into the Martial Combat Specialized Master Monk class. A Secret Book allows a mage to promote into a Summoner. A Warrior's Pride? Warrior's Cross? A something or other will allow your Dwarven Fighter to promote into a Baron, and so on. Shining Force 3 does not have anything like this at all. And it's sad too, these item-based promotions add a bit of nuance to promoting your dudes. Sometimes I want Kazan as a wizard, but sometimes I want him as a summoner. Why doesn't SF3 have these? I have no idea. I cannot even begin to harbor a guess. And once you are done with the 3 main scenarios, you have the bonus premium disc to look forward to. This disc was a bonus mail-in item that you could get by sending in your spines of all 3 Shining Force 3 scenarios to Camelot way back in the day. They'd then send you the premium disc. This disc was loaded with all kinds of goodies from the 3 scenarios. Art, music, videos. You also got a big interview with Hiroyuki Takahashi. But the huge draw of this disc is the bonus battle gauntlet. Basically, a huge boss rush of all the bosses from the 3 SF3 scenarios, plus some bosses from Shining Force 2, and Shining Force Gaiden. Holy crap. You can't heal in between battles or resurrect characters, and if you die or regress, you have to start from the beginning, but these are some very satisfying battles. Just make sure everyone is super leveled, you have loads of great healing items, and your characters are equipped with the absolute end-all gear. Another super cool thing is that you can mix and match your force from all 3 of the SF3 scenarios. So you can have a force with Synbios, Medion, and Julian, a force with half a dozen mages, a force with multiple characters who have aura level 4. The premium disc is an incredible thing to behold. There is one thing that I agree with young me about. This game is horribly ugly. Oh, I know, babe, I'm sorry. From the weird Donkey Kong Country-esque map sprites to the polygonal mess battle models, Shining Force 3 is just straight up bad to look at. No one looks back fondly on the Saturn's graphical abilities. The thing was meant to be a powerful sprite-based machine until they realized last minute that everyone was going to polygons and to 3D. So they added a second processor and pushed forward with square polygons as opposed to everybody else using triangle polygons. Early PS1 polygonal graphics are very in the retro nostalgia zone right now. People love the Silent Hillses, Final Fantasies, Wild Armses. Cool. I am very glad for you. If something brings someone happiness, I literally think that's great, even when it's stuff that I'm not personally a fan of. And I am not a fan of early polygonal graphics, and SF3 is definitely no different. The music is very Motoi Sakuraba. If you like his style, you'll probably like this. It is very much his normal style of, let's just do the same 70s prog rock album every single time. This is something else that colored my initial thoughts on this game when I played it so many decades ago. I always pictured Sakuraba as the Tails/Star Ocean guy. To hear him in My Shining Force really set me off. But yeah, after 200 hours, it's definitely a fine soundtrack. And it has a lot of tracks, a truly ridiculous amount of battle themes. Although one complaint is that some of the tracks kind of feel a little bit unfinished. Character design is pretty great overall, with the face window art looking great most of the time. With such a huge cast, there needed to be more artists doing the art, so there are 4 artists doing the portrait art. And let me tell you, that is a lot of portrait art. You obviously have all of the forces, you have the villains, you have important NPCs, shop assistants, just loads of faces. But everyone in Scenario 1 has a new portrait with brand new art when promoted. Scenario 2, these portraits are just palette swaps. Scenario 3 is brand new art for your force when they're promoted, but also when you promote all of the Synbios force and all of the Medion force. They all get new portrait art. It's just a wacky amount of art. But with 4 artists, some of it is bound to not quite look as good as some of the others. The character David, for instance, all of his portraits make him look like a weird porno version of Barry Denon's Pontius Pilate. Like I said earlier, no re-releases. Sega has re-released Shining Force, Shining Force 2, and Shining in the Darkness about 9 million times, but never ever Shining Force 3. In fact, their Saturn love has been almost entirely non-existent. Even Shining Force CD was re-released recently on the Mega Drive Mini. Is that what it's actually called? And Shining Force the Sword of Heijou was re-released on those Uber Mini Game Gears with the screens that are so small that you can't even read the text of the games. But nothing for Shining Force 3. And there have been requests for a Shining Force 3 re-release, remaster, remake for a very long time. Dropping all 3 scenarios and the premium disc in one big bundle sounds like a great idea. From a fan's perspective, let's not forget, Sega is a massive corporation, and there's only one thing corporations like: exploiting the labor of the money. And if a re-release, remaster, remake of a game isn't going to rake in enough capital, they are not going to do it. So this is when the fucking internet enters the chat. The Shining Force 3 Translation Project is a fan project dedicated to providing a free online translation for all of Shining Force 3. This includes Scenarios 2, 3, the premium disc, and a reworking of Scenario 1 to fit in better with the other scenarios, since Sega rewrote the story for the English release to be self-contained and ignore the other scenarios. This is an ongoing process with new patches being released every couple of months. It's this dedication from this team of fans that has allowed me to play these games long after Sega has forgotten about them. It's this brilliant fan community that keeps this game, this series, alive. I am super thankful to everyone at the Shining Force 3 Translation Project and Shining Force Central for allowing me to finally enjoy these games so long after the fact. This community is one of the best around, and their dedication to preserving this huge slice of strategy pie should be applauded by all. Shining Force 3 is incredible. Young Richard, straight in the bin. SF3 is a lot different from earlier Shining Force games, but at its core, Shining Force 3 is a Shining Force game. It was the last gasp of a beloved series that was released during a desperate time in Sega's history. The Saturn was a failure, and thusly Shining Force 3 was a failure. Corporations want money, and the Saturn in Shining Force 3 did not get this corporation any money. But the love for this series, for this game, for these games, shines on here on the internet. Passionate fans from across the globe can share their love for Shining Force with like-minded people. Fans can play these games decades later thanks to the hard work of people like the Shining Force 3 Translation Project and Moogie at Shining Force Central. Shining Force has a small but very exciting Reddit community, maybe the least toxic subreddit I have ever seen. Shining Force isn't going to go away despite Sega's best attempts at indifference, and that is definitely something. I feel a bit more whole now that I have played this entire saga. And though it's imperfect, this is still my Shining Force. Well, Jesus Christ, that was a long one. Holy crap. I hope you enjoyed it though. It took me a long time to do. And I am very happy that I have been able to do it. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on Shining Force 3 or the Shining Force series, or just the Shining series in general. I know a lot of you who follow me love the Shining series, so sound off below. Also, RPG Fortress has a Discord now. How wild is that? Come around and talk about all kinds of fun things like hex grids versus square grids, over-leveling your mages to get super spells early, and the intricacies of how Kobeni is Chainsaw Man Best Girl. Find a link below. I also started a Patreon. I know, everyone has one and it's done to death. But it's an easy way for viewers to tip a buck or two if they want to. There are 10 levels and they are all basically kind of the same thing. They offer a thank you in the credits of every video, which is very standard. And they all have a different Discord role with a fancy little title and color. Ooh, sparkly. Find the Patreon link below as well. Okay, post-recording editor Richard here. I neglected to mention that we're running a contest on the Discord. We're giving away a copy of Pathfinder Kingmaker for Steam. It's the Imperial Edition, so it has all of the DLC, a bunch of additional characters, and other bonus content. It's an absolutely huge game. I never managed to finish it myself, but I did put 78 hours into it, and looking at guides, that's only about 25% of the game. It is an absolutely huge beast of a game. And it's Pathfinder, so if you like Pathfinder / D&D stuff, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, you're gonna like this one. So to enter, just go to our Discord, go to the contents page, and react to the Kingmaker post. You can even use one of our custom RPG Fortress reaction images. Maybe Kiwi the Tort, maybe relevant to this video, Pen the Penguin, or just go completely old school with Jogurt the Yogurt. Good luck to everybody. Editor Richard out. Editor Richard is back again. Shortly after my last edit, the channel met the threshold to become a YouTube partner. And shortly after that, became a YouTube partner. This is all thanks to viewers like you. I never once expected this to actually happen, so thank you all so very much. You're literally the best fans on the planet, and I am so happy to have you here with me. I'll do some sort of custom channel badges and emojis sometime in the future. So many Shining Force emojis inbound. Okay, back to the video again. In the meantime, please rate, ring the bell, share, comment, buy a healing seed, equip your middle sword, resurrect Hans, he's dead again. Put Blue in your team and just kill gargoyles till he's a flying tank. Eat your cheerful bread, and glug down that power wine till you're nice and powerfully drunk, fam. For RPG Fortress, I've been Richard. See you soon, and don't forget to hug Jogurt the Yogurt. Goodbye.